Now to the topic of the hour. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to Michael.
Thank you, Sally. Hi, everybody. I'm Mike Parker. I'm gonna just take a second here and share my screen so you can see my presentation. And we're on the wrong page. And here we are. Cool. So today's presentation is called Tools for Accessing Land. And we're going to run through, both Celize and I, a few different tools that we feel like are really useful for beginning farmers or even people with experience or maybe running your own farm operation if you're looking to either access land for the first time or maybe be expanding your operation or maybe buying land for the first time if you're on leased land. So there should be something here for everybody, even maybe if you're not farming, if you're a service provider that works with farmers. To kick it off by introducing myself and the organization that I work for. So I work for the National Young Farmers Coalition. We are a national grassroots network of farmers and ranchers and other kinds of supporters that are working on reforming policy to be more friendly to young farmers, beginning farmers, diversified farms, BIPOC producers. We have a chapter, a network of chapters all throughout the country. So right now we're at 47 farmer-led chapters in 28 states. We have 2 chapters in Iowa. There's the Driftless chapter, which kind of cuts across the region in kind of northeast Iowa, also an eastern Iowa chapter. So maybe we got some chapter members here today, or chapter leaders. Would be nice to, I wish I could see your faces, but I can't. Yeah, so Young Farmers Coalition, in addition to doing policy work, does some technical assistance work, creating different resources that we feel like might be missing that a lot of local organizations might not be providing on their own. So we try to support local organizations in their work one-on-one with farmers. We don't do a ton of work one-on-one with farmers. Usually we're supporting our chapters and supporting kind of more national initiatives and policy initiatives. But in my role at the organization, I'm lucky enough to be able to work with some farmers directly in New York State and also do things like this, educational projects all around the country. So I've had really great experience working with farmers who are in this state of mind, thinking about buying land, trying to understand their financing options and just strategy towards it. So that's kind of what we'll talk about today. Just a little bit about me. I think, like I mentioned, I live in New York State. I work for the National Young Farmers Coalition. I'm also a first-generation farmer and beginning farmer, starting up a cattle operation in Cooperstown, New York this year. And I have done a lot of work in farmland access, but also working with farmers and other entrepreneurs on business planning and on farm direct marketing. So along those lines, I also work for an organization called Farm Generations Cooperative. You might have heard of a software platform we're creating called Grown By. We're actually in the exhibitors hall if you want to learn more about that. But Grown By is a direct marketing sales app that we're launching this winter. But back to the topic at hand is farmland access. So my presentation today will be mostly on number 2 here, the planning ahead portion. But I think it helps to give a little bit of context of how you should go about this strategy, like what your strategy should be around accessing land. Because I don't think it's as simple as having the capital to buy land, finding a property that seems right for your farm business, and then just buying it. I think there's usually a lot more to it, especially if you are a first generation producer, if you're not inheriting family land, maybe if you're new to a place, maybe if you're new to the business itself and, kind of getting started with your business while you're also getting started on your property. So there's a lot to it. But let's jump into number 1 here first, just understanding your risks. I don't have a tool to present with this, but I do like to always start with this when I'm thinking about planning for land access. So I think it's important for producers to consider which you're taking and how those risks are unique to you and what you are doing to mitigate those risks or eliminate those risks in the process of accessing land. Because typically, especially if you're buying farmland, if you're buying farmland for the first time, it's probably the biggest financial investment you've ever made. And that is a big risk. That's a big financial risk. You're putting your personal finances in a kind of situation in a long-term way that you want to make sure you're confident about. You want to be doing everything around land access confidently. But financial risks aren't usually the only risks you're taking either. If you're new to an area, there's a risk in maybe moving your family to a new place that you don't know the schools, or you maybe not know people, or maybe you don't have family around you to support you in your life, and the things that you have to do outside of running your farm. You might be, let's think of some other big risks you might be taking. If you're new in your farm business, if you've only been farming for a few years, you're probably just learning your operations still, and learning your markets, and learning where you can be selling, who your customers are, even day-to-day tasks around production. So getting onto a piece of property in a somewhat permanent way, if you're buying land, kind of pigeonholes you into maybe certain kinds of production methods because you're limited by your land, or maybe into certain markets because you're just in a place where there's only one city nearby for direct marketing. So I think those are all important considerations to make, and to understand and literally write out what kind of risks you're taking as you're going along this process, and thinking about how you can eliminate some of those risks, so that you're not taking them all at the same time. Most beginning farmers that I speak to are thinking about owning land, or thinking about owning land at some point in the future, even if it's not how they get started. And I'm always advising people to think about, how do you gradually get to that point of owning land? Because typically you're going to be more prepared for it if you've been running your business. If you have some capital, you'll have more access to outside capital if you can show that you have cash flow in your business. So all those things kind of lead towards, or point towards, taking your time and understanding your risks, and trying to mitigate them one at a time. I think the reason I have this photo here is just, I go every year to the Renaissance Fair. I am a nerd, and this guy's always performing at the Renaissance Fair near me. And he's like, up there, and he's spinning swords on his head, and he lights things on fire, and he's throwing them around and juggling. And I think about people who are running successful farm businesses on land that they own, who are first generation diversified farmers. You look at somebody like that and it looks a bit like this to me. How did they get to the point where they're juggling swords while balancing a sword on their head with another sword balanced on top of that sword, and there's things on fire, and he's talking to an audience, and how the way he got there was not balancing a sword on his head one day. He started doing these things one at a time, put them all together. And I think that's really the way that you have to approach a big project like land access. Is you're doing one thing at a time, get good at it, or good enough that you feel like you could add on another project. So that's a long way of saying, number one, understand your risks. The bulk of my presentation, though, is about planning for land access. And there's a few tools that the National Young Farmers Coalition has put together that I'm going to demo for you today that help with planning around land access. The first one is called the Finding Farmland Calculator. And you see there's two URLs there. So to get to the calculator in English, it's findingfarmland.org. We also have the same calculator website in Spanish. So that's findingfarmland.org/ES. And I have the calculator open here somewhere. Here we go. So I'm just going to take a few minutes and demonstrate how the calculator works. So this is a financial planning tool. It's meant for people who are considering buying farmland. So it's not very useful if you're thinking about your long-term tenure as leasing farmland. But the next tool I have will help for people in that situation. It's based on you having a property in mind, or maybe a price range in mind, and putting that price range in. We're going to do 200,000 to make my math in my head easier. And so you're basically creating this scenario to understand how you're going to pay for that farmland over time. And the point of the calculator is basically educational. So it is a nice planning tool, and it can help you understand what your monthly payments on a mortgage would be for 200,000. Help you understand what are the different capital tools out there, like farm service agency loans versus maybe farm credit loans, or and it explains a lot of the terms that are used in the process that if you're new to buying real estate, maybe you don't really understand. So things like closing costs. If you hover over, it'll explain what closing costs mean. Yeah, so it has a lot of those nifty tools throughout the calculator. Kind of, if you don't understand something, it'll link you out to more resources. So like if you don't even know what FSA is, which could be a really important partner in buying farmland, we give you a little explanation, and we've written a guidebook about this, so you could link out to the guidebook. The point of a lot of this, of us going through that effort, is I feel like a big part of the challenge around accessing financing, accessing land, is having sort of the confidence to go to a lender, go meet a lender and say, I'm ready to do this. I think I can afford a property for this much, and let's talk about how I could get a loan for this. There's a certain level of confidence of just being able to get to that point in your business, in your life, to be able to make an asset purchase like that. But also, if you've never worked with a lender before, you're really putting a lot out there. You're putting a lot of personal information out there. You're putting a lot of your hopes and dreams out there to somebody who's probably a stranger. So I think it helps to be really prepared about the process, so that you're also not feeling like vulnerable and surprised by any parts of the process. So let's use the tool a little bit here. It'll also give you some warnings throughout. So if you were buying a property for $200,000, you probably don't have $200,000, so you're probably going to get a loan. But the first thing you'll notice is when I start trying to make a loan, I get this little warning in here. And the warning is telling you that you're trying to add a loan without having added a down payment first. And usually any lender, when you're buying property, is going to want you to have some kind of skin in the game, they call it. Want you to have a down payment, because they don't want to lend you all of the money towards buying it. They think that you should be willing and ready to put some money towards as a cash down payment. So that's, there's a couple little warnings like that pop up throughout the tool if you might be doing something that might be unrealistic. So let's say in this scenario, we're actually going to put a 10% down payment. So you have to come to this with $20,000, and we're going to get the rest, which shows right here. This kind of like fills up as you add more capital. So we're going to need a loan for this additional 180,000. Right now, interest rates are a lot better than this. So let's say we're getting a better rate, and we're going to say it's amortized over 25 years. And again, if you don't know what amortization is, you just pop this open, and it'll tell you amortization is the time period over which the loan is paid off. So, you hear like 30-year mortgage, it's because there's a 30-year amortization period. Okay, so let's see what happens here. The calculator's estimating you have a $900 a month loan payment, but that's really just for the capital to buy the land. So you need $200,000 in principal. But there's all these other costs of owning property. So you might have property taxes. Let's say these are, I don't know what things are like in Iowa for farmland, but I'm going to say they're $3,000 a year for this property. And you might have some kind of insurance that you need to have if maybe there's a home on the property, of some kind of homeowner's insurance. Okay, so it's showing that you haven't entered closing costs. So closing costs are things like paying for your attorney, or lenders usually have an origination fee of some sort. So let's say there's a 2% worth of closing costs, so $4,000. Okay, so this is showing you now some of your results. So in order to buy this $200,000 property, we're actually spending $400,000 over the course of 25 years, with a lot of that going to taxes, some of that going to your property insurance, some going to your closing costs, and then interest and principal. And if you hover over a particular year, this is a pretty simple example. So it's showing the same thing in every year, every month, the payment's going to be the same unless your taxes changes, yada, yada. But you're basically paying that principal and interest plus taxes plus insurance. Okay, so this is what it would cost to buy this property, $1,200 a month. If you're business planning, this is a really helpful tool, because now you could put this expense into your cash flow budget, and you know how much money that you need to make, because one of your fixed costs, your mortgage payment, is $1,259. Okay, so that's the kind of main way of using the tool of this calculator. Is if you're doing a business plan, it helps you understand your monthly mortgage payment. But another use of the tool is, if you see at the top here, we're going to call this scenario 1. You could also create a new scenario, and it's called scenario 2. And we're going to say the property is the same price. And you could flip back and forth between these. This is the one we just did, and this is the one we're setting up now. And we're going to say, well, I've never heard of this FSA thing, but let's see what FSA can do for me. FSA is basically the part of USDA that's able to give loans. And they have a few different ownership loan types, but we're just going to focus on direct ownership loan today because it's pretty simple. This is like basically FSA's mortgage. Notice this didn't pop up again because FSA doesn't actually necessarily require a down payment. Usually you'll put in a down payment, but let's say we're going to do a much smaller down payment because FSA allows that. Also, their direct ownership loans have longer amortization periods than most banks are willing to give you. So we're going to leave this at 40 years, which is the maximum. Also, their rates are always below market. Right now, the rate's at 2.5%. So this will preload in here from the FSA website. We're going to say the same taxes. Does anybody remember how much taxes? I'm sorry, you can't call out from the audience. Filling things out. We have 4,000 closing costs. Interesting with FSA, another interesting thing is that you can finance your closing costs. So if your lender is charging you or anybody else is charging you something, there's appraisal fee, whatever it is, you can include that in your loan so you can pay it over time. So you notice in this scenario, there's only $5,000 down payment is the cash at closing. So you only have to come to this with $5,000. First scenario, we came to this with $24,000. So that's one of those things that really kind of gets people who haven't bought real estate before, is just knowing that it's not just committing to a loan, it's also just having that cash on hand at any given time is really prohibitive to buying land. Okay, so back to the FSA scenario. And so now if we look at the results here, we're actually paying more over time. And partially that's because we're taking out more money in our loan and there's a longer period of payment, so you're paying more interest, but also the payments it's just under $1,000 a month, and we only had to put $5,000 down rather than $24,000 down. So this is, you could switch back and forth here to remember what this was, 1,200. So it's just a way for you to be able to compare what different options are, and whether, if you feel like you can't afford that 1,200, maybe you need to find a lender like FSA that can give you a lower interest rate and a lower payback and a longer payback period so that you can have a lower payment. Or you need to use FSA because maybe somebody else won't give you a loan. Maybe they don't think you, are ready for a big mortgage like that. FSA is typically the lender of first opportunity, they call themselves, kind of the lender that if you're not able to get a loan from a bank, but you're eligible otherwise as a farmer, they should be able to work with you. So that's the first part of the calculator. It's just using it as a financial planning tool. This further down part here is if you're business planning and you have some other numbers about your business, FSA will help. FSA, I'm doing like an FSA commercial here. The calculator will help you evaluate your business plan along with the property you're looking at and try to help you understand if you can afford it. And the reason we put this here is because this is one of the, I think, scariest parts of working with a lender is showing them your business plan, showing them maybe your past financials, maybe showing them your income that you make off farm, and kind of having them judge you on whether they think you're ready financially for this kind of, to take on this kind of loan. So you can fill out some of this information if you're business planning. You might have a lot of these details. You don't have to fill out everything, but the more you fill out, the more you will get in the results here. So it'll calculate these ratios, and it also defines the ratios like everything else, shows you how they're calculated. And this is really how lenders make decisions when a borrower comes to them and asks, can I afford this $200,000 loan? They say, well, let's back up. Let's get all this information about your business plan. Let's say you're expecting to sell, $90,000 a year. You have all these expenses. We're just going to say, for the sake of time, that, you have, I don't know, $60,000 worth of expenses every year, and you're taking something like, $25,000 from that for your payment out of that as the farmer. So we got a nice small farm business here, and maybe either your partner or you has some kind of off-farm job. You're making also, I don't know, $45,000 a year from that. You could put in different assets and liabilities. For the sake of time, let's just keep going. Same thing for your business. You put assets and liabilities. So all this, if you're going through any kind of business planning course, or even if you're working with a lender, they're helping you make these calculations and understand what your liabilities are, what your assets are, and they're going to want to see all that. And all these would be filled out if we, filled out some of these. But for now, it looks like we have, they're able to, the calculator is able to calculate the debt to income ratio because we put that income in. So this is saying that your debt to income ratio is just 17%, which is really great. So you're making enough income to be able to afford this loan payment in this situation. There's some other kind of nifty things here. So a little graph showing you how your equity in your property versus your debt in the property would change over time. It kind of explains some of these terms. Has a little lease versus buy calculator, which is nice to know if you're thinking about either buying a property like this or say leasing a property that, for the next 15 years, say, and you're going to be paying rent that's, I don't know, say it's just a few $100s a month, which you might have to do a little calculation here if you're paying yearly. It'll show you how much rent that you would have paid in that time versus how much you would have paid off in this property. So if you're thinking of it as a comparison, or if you've got an option to lease a property or buy a property, it can kind of show you, well, how long do you need to lease it until it really makes sense for you to be buying this thing? And I just want to get to the bottom here because one important part of the calculator is you can download all these results. So if you any financial information you keep in here is going to disappear when you leave the screen because we don't want to keep any of your personal information. So if you click this, you could download this scenario as a PDF and you get it all on this nifty little one-pager that if you're working with a lender, you could print this out and bring it to them. If you're doing some kind of maybe business planning course, or if you're a service provider and you run a business planning course and you want to put this in as part of your course using the calculator, this is sort of like something you could spew out as homework and talk about it with farmers in your courses and talk about what some of these things mean. Okay, so that's basically the calculator. I'm happy to take questions later, but one thing you might have noticed when we popped up here is the second tool. And maybe I'll flip back to my presentation. So the second tool that we have is a kind of an accompanying course. So this is an online course called the Finding Farmland Course. We also have a version in Spanish that is not exactly the same thing as the course in English, but has a lot of different resources that can help you learn about different aspects of buying land and sort of get back to that first topic I talked about understanding your risks and addressing those risks. So you can get to the course through this URL here, youngfarmers.org/Finding Farmland Course. Or when you're on the calculator here, you can actually just click it right there. Actually, I already had it open, like a cooking show. I'm all set up here. So the Finding Farmland course is 9 lessons that help you understand different aspects of purchasing farmland or leasing farmland or going about the process of transferring farmland. So it's really intended for beginning farmers rather than like landowners. And we could just pop into one lesson. This is all free. This is all take it at your own pace. There are activities throughout and different multimedia lessons. So let's pop into the lesson on financial planning. And we built this course with a whole bunch of different partner organizations that contributed interviews and articles and different kinds of resources. And so throughout the course, you'll see, you could click open. There's a blog post in each lesson that, has kind of some lessons about farm goals, financial planning in this case. There's also an interview with whoever we had write the article. And there's always an activity. So this practice activity gives you some cash flow budget templates. And we also have, a video of me kind of going through the cash flow budget. So there's, videos throughout here. All these videos are different demos, either using the calculator or in this case, it's using this cash flow budget that we put in as a template. So basically, if you go through each lesson of this course, it kind of takes you through a process of thinking about the different land tenure options and how you learn about land tenure options, thinking about financial planning, thinking about access to credit. So who are the different lenders, or what are other ways to access capital, financing options. So again, kind of understanding what are lenders looking for, and how do you fit into that. Partners is a really important lesson for learning about who are the different partners out there, like Farm Service Agency, but also like local land trusts or other organizations that want to help farmers get solid land tenure and be able to grow their businesses. And then there's 3 lessons on the different primary ways of accessing land. So that could be leasing, buying, or transferring, which often is a combination of leasing and buying over time. So transferring a property from a current farmer. So it has lessons in there and case studies and all different resources. And all this is just available anytime you'd want to go through this independently, or if you have a group, like if you're in the Young Farmers Coalition chapter and a group of you wants to is thinking about land access together, maybe you want to take the course together and do it over time independently. That's the course. I'll go back to my presentation here. And so those are the 2 main tools that we've created for young farmers who are approaching land access for the first time. We also have a Young Farmers podcast where I listed out here, and I think this presentation is going to be shared like on the conference page. And there's there's at least 7 different episodes that focus specifically on different land access topics. So I definitely recommend listening to our podcast, because I think it's I don't know, fun in general. But these are the ones that I pulled out as being really specific to land access if you want to learn more. And then we have a lot of different resources on our site. So if you just went to youngfarmers.org, we have a publications page. And some of this information, like I showed you before, we have a guidebook on the Farm Service Agency loan programs. So that's a great one to read. There's a guidebook on working with land trusts and understanding what a land trust is and how conservation can make land access more affordable. And then there's a few different ones that are focused on policy. So on understanding how state policies and federal policies contribute to either helping or hindering farmers getting land access, and some ideas for changing those. And in that vein, we actually just put out a land access policy website. So it's at youngfarmers.org/land. My colleague Holly recently wrote this report on farmland access policy, and it's a useful website for looking at case studies. So understanding how other farmers are accessing land in innovative ways, but also if you are working on any kind of policy advocacy. So if you are a group, whether a farmer or a service provider that's interested in changing the way that policy works to make it more friendly to farmers trying to get on land or trying to transfer land, there's a whole policy library here that gives examples of ways that other people in other states have succeeded in changing policy, and makes it so you don't have to reinvent the wheel in learning about and proposing local and state policy. So I think those are all the tools I have to share. This is my contact information again. You're welcome to reach out to me anytime if I could explain using any of these tools, or if I can kind of like give you some guidance, some referrals to service providers in your areas. Through this work, I fortunate to meet a lot of other service providers, and so anytime somebody reached out to me, I'm happy to kind of introduce you to people closer to home who might be able to help you out. But along those lines, I did promise that there was a third part of the strategy here about, basically it's about who you know. And this is another big challenge for first generation farmers who are maybe new to the business or new to an area, that it's good to understand that farm properties are actually not usually transferred on the open market. They're not usually there's not usually a for sale sign and then it's sold. More often than not, they're actually transferred between people who know each other through some other way, whether they've been neighbors their whole lives, or whether it's somebody that you've met through selling at a farmer's market together. Often you kind of have to be within a network of farmers to know when property is going to be coming available and to work with the current owner to kind of transfer that to you. So I say unfortunately there because, you know, there's a lot of privilege to that. That's if you're not in this privileged position of really knowing a lot of other people and maybe being from a place, there, you know, it could be really difficult for you. But there are definitely local partners and local service providers that can help you with that. And that's why we have Celize from PFI presenting next. So obviously PFI is a great partner for being able to help you with land access if you're in Iowa. And they also have a program that Celize is going to present and share with us that is meant just to help producers kind of build that network and find other people in Iowa who can help you access land and who have properties available. So I guess without further ado, I will stop sharing my screen here and pass it off to Celize.
Thank you. Let me also get my screen all good to go. Okay, great. Yeah, that was a perfect segue because I'm like, that's going to lead into exactly what I'm talking about.
See, I was planning ahead. I knew what was happening here.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, so thank you all for tuning in, and thank you, Michael, for that amazing just kind of even walkthrough and demo, especially of the calculator. Yeah, I am a fan of it, and I'd love to kind of talk about that sometime soon, especially walking through it. But yeah, kind of going on what Michael said on tools for accessing land, I kind of want to segue. That's a perfect segue and kind of take a step back and think about, you know, really building those relationships and how one can utilize their networks and their connection to others to really access land and how PFI can help you do that. And so when we talk about connecting with others, one of the things that we are always advantageous of encouraging our farmers or our members to do is really think about when you're finding farmland, define what you're looking for. So are you looking for a certain amount of acres? Are you looking for a certain topography of land? And are you talking about it? Have you talked, I mean, maybe all the conversations have been up here, but you know, have you talked with friends? Have you talked with your neighbors? Have you talked with other individuals in your community about what you're looking for? And really being creative and open-minded, you know, thinking about all the dreams and the things that you're wanting to venture in terms of finding farmland, really be creative and open-minded to all the things and all the possibilities. But then in and of that, really thinking about, are you ready for it? Do you have the skills? Do you have the finances and the means possible? What knowledge are you acquainted with? Like, are you well equipped to know how to put up fencing or watering or launch enterprises that you're interested in? Just as, you know, Michael had mentioned earlier, what type of capital have you already built? What type of business have you already established? Do you already have mentors or other individuals in your community or in your tool belt that you know of that have experience in what it is that you want to venture into? And all of these things kind of add up to best suit yourself to really launch into this pursuit of farmland. So then also in and of taking a step back, when we think about really in your venture of finding farmland and communicating and networking with people, we say to really draft and create a really great pitch for land and for looking for land. So one, you want to identify your goal, and in and of that, explain what it is that you want to do, what it is that you want to achieve in sourcing this land and starting and beginning your own farm, and really communicate what sets you apart. You know, I think that a lot of beginning first generation or even folks who have experienced farming or worked on farms are interested in various different enterprises, but you have your own story, and that story sets you apart from, you know, someone else who has the same enterprise or is doing the same things. But you yourself and how you want to carry out your businesses or your enterprise does set you apart. So really let that shine along with your goals and your adventure to really, you know, start your own farm and find farmland. And then really engage with the questions. So when you're talking to folks or potential landowners, you know, really thinking about and asking them and engaging them in the question of what they're seeking in the tenant. What kind of individual do they aspire or hope to sell to? What type of relationship do they want? Some folks want to find someone and just hand everything over. Some folks really want to stay engaged and have a say in what's happening or what type of enterprises or what type of infrastructure is occurring on the land. and really also ask them what their expectations are when managing the land. So maybe it's in row crop ground right now, but they're really looking for someone to transition it into pasture acres. If that's something that you want to do, these types of goals and communications are really essential when communicating with landowners, and putting all these aspects together and then practicing it. So how are you, taking what's here and then putting it out verbally into the world and then communicating with folks is really essential. And so one tool that I want to share with you that PFI has for folks, not only in Iowa, but also across the Midwest, several people engage on the website within the state of Iowa, but like I said, across the Midwest as well. So one of the tools that we have for helping folks access land is called Find a Farmer. So what is Find a Farmer? So Find a Farmer is a website that connects landowners and land seekers, really to help preserve family farms across the Midwest. So PFI started this website back in 2011, and Sally will probably put the link to the website in the chat if you don't mind. And this platform was really to establish and launch a communication and conversations between landowners and land seekers, and really source as like a match service. So how can you create your own profile and connect with others who are, looking and then also searching? And one thing that's unique, from other websites, rather than just like, oh, here's my profile, this is what I want, and then, oh, this is where I'm at. It's really to showcase your story, why you want to do this, who you are, what's your vision, what's your mission for looking for land and starting a farm, and really being able to showcase that, which we'll see here in a minute, and how you, showcase yourself and your story on this website, and being able to upload pictures and be really specific about what type of farm and what type of land you're looking for. So currently right now we have about over 2,000 users on the website, and about 25% of those individuals are landowners, and then the other 75% are land seekers. So we're really heavy right now on a lot of people looking for land, but don't really have a lot of landowners engaged on the website. So one thing that we're really trying to do at PFI is continue to launch more promotions and like really guide people to this tool, but then also really recruit landowners to the website, so that we have kind of this balance between landowners and land seekers, and it can be a really fruitful engagement rather than just the site being full of people who are looking for land, but then aren't really engaging with a lot of landowners. And also capturing more stories. I'm going to share a story here in a few slides down about a match that was successful using Find a Farmer, but really showcasing those stories and letting people know not only how to use it, but how it was fruitful through folks' experiences. So once you go to the website, what do you do? How do you make a profile? So you'll start by creating an account with your email, where you are located, what type of land you're looking for. Are you a landowner, land seeker? And then once you go in and make your profile, you have the ability to describe your farm that you're looking for, farm characteristics. Or if you're a landowner, you're able to detail the type of land or farm that you are seeking to rent or lease or sell. And then also there's a portion of the profile that you're allowed to really tell your stories, like I shared. So who are you? What are your values? What you're looking for? What's your story? And then be able to upload photos to showcase that. And then there's ability for you to search for landowners or land seekers that meet your criteria. So you can do it on a mile-based radius. So for example, use an easy example of Ames, Iowa, where PFI is located, and say you're wanting to stay within the central Iowa area, you can be able to search for other landowners within 50 to 100 mile to 250 mile radius within that aspect. And that's how you're able to search for folks and then be able to then begin a conversation. So once you put that mile radius or put those parameters on there, then you're able to query a list of individuals that you might be looking for. So say I'm a land seeker and I'm looking for people within 100-mile radius for pasture land. I'm able to put those criteria in the search tool and then query a list of, the next 20, 25 people within that meet all of that criteria, and then be able to fruitfully request like a friend request, like how we do in other social media platforms, and then be able to engage in conversation and send a message. And then hopefully those conversations then, can catapult off of the website, but those initial engagements can occur on the Find a Farmer website. So what do these profiles look like? So I'm gonna run through an example. So when you go in and make your profile, this is the place and space that you can put a little bit more information about who you are and describe your story. And so, for example, this individual or this account kind of shared, we believe in the value of family farming. We're open to partnering with our farmer and sharecropping arrangement if the farmer is right for us. So this is a landowner who's putting a description of the type of farmer that they're looking for. And so we're looking for a farmer who has experience with organic production methods and who's willing to transition our farm to more sustainable methods, including cover crops and less reliance on chemical invasive methods. And then as you see here, you can see the information like describing the type of farmer that they're looking for. And we'll see later on a little bit more about what type of land that they own, and they're able to describe that in detail. And so next shows a picture of the profile. So you can put a picture of the land or you and your family, your name, and then a little bit of description about who you are and what the farm or what the land that you're choosing to seek. And just as might be familiar as other social media platforms, you can see you can add that individual as a friend and then begin chatting with them and conversing. And here's a little bit that shows in detail on the second tab. So we've established our profile, we've kind of written what it is that we're looking for, the type of tenant that we're looking for, and now we're able to describe the type of land that we're looking for. So here you can see this landowner is growing corn and soybeans conventionally, but looking to find a farmer to transition it to organic. They talk about the number of acres that they have available. So 73 acres of this farm are tillable, highly productive. And then the other 30 acres are timber where they're located. So they're located in Neoda, Illinois. They describe 73 acres, but maybe they have up to 103 in total. And they're looking for someone in the next 10 to 20 years. And then you're able to put some kind of tags here, some key features to describe a little bit more in detail. And that helps folks be able to search folks more specifically. And so just as Michael kind of shared some videos from the website that walks you through the tools, we also have a video that walks you through the Find a Farmer website, and Sally will put the link to the YouTube video in the chat. So if you have questions or wanting to go back and have some further assistance on how to navigate the website, you can look at that video. And I just want to share a brief story about a land match. So those of you who tuned in on Thursday night and watched our premiere of Livestock on the Land, and those of you who didn't, totally fine, you can watch it on YouTube. We have some familiar faces from that film here on the screen. We have John and Shirley Waite on the left and Trish and Bart Verellen on the right. And so Bart is an individual who is aspiring to farm, a veteran living in Florida, but really was advantageous to come back to the Midwest and farm, but did not have any type of land access and didn't really have anyone to engage with in terms of accessing land or how to start his own farm or his own business, and created a profile on the Find a Farmer site, and then was able to connect with Shirley, and then soon enough was able to launch a relationship and figure out how Bart could then be able to rent acres from Shirley's farm. And then it's been interesting because Bart has been able to bring kind of a new enterprise to the farm and really cultivate change on the landscape that Shirley wanted to see in terms of having rotational grazing with Bart's sheep, and then being able to see the soil change and the land change from converted row crop ground to now pastured lands for livestock that Bart is raising. So I just want to read a few quotes. So this is actually a quote from Shirley on the top right. So we met twice before this is from Bart. So we met twice before I even looked at the land, and it was important for me to understand what their goals were. And Shirley says, Bart showed up just in time. There were sections of clay on the property that had been overworked and were nearly barren, but now they're thriving and they're still weeds, but the sheep like them. And if you're curious about what that looks like now, definitely look at Livestock on the Land, and there's some beautiful images that show the farm and the sheep actually grazing across some of those hills. So just thinking back and reflecting back around what's in your toolbox, who are you talking to, who should be part of your planning process, if that's a lawyer, if that's a financial planner, thinking about that. And if there's other areas of support that you're needing, whether it comes to financials, skills, knowledge, mentorship, thinking about who you can engage and taking advantage of opportunities like this, organizations like PFI, the National Young Farmers Coalition, to really engage and start having communications around how to access land, and really stocking your toolbox. And so where you can find more information, there's several organizations. Here are a few. Of course, the National Young Farmers Coalition and the Farmland Calculator is mentioned, the Farmland Access Hub and Land Access Navigators. Several land access navigators are RPFI members like Kate Edwards and Hannah Breckbill. If you have questions or would like to get connected to them, please let me know and I'd love to connect you. And then just definitely stay in touch. Myself and Greg work under the Next Generation team, looking to avidly connect landowners to land seekers and vice versa. So please definitely keep in touch, and I want to save time for questions or discussions. So I'll stop there.
Lease, we have two questions so far, and they're both for Find a Farmer. The first one is, how can you tell if a profile is active? Ben has recently sent several messages and not received a reply. And actually, it was one of them was the one you showed the example of.
Okay, great. So yeah, that is definitely something that you could definitely email me. And that's one of the things that I think is really challenging with Find Farmer is that there isn't like a active status to know how active a profile is or someone is, but we can definitely help you engage with someone. So I know on the site, like personal information isn't shared, so emails aren't shared or anything like that. But if there's someone on there that you haven't heard from, please let me know. And I can also, as a admin to the site, I can like nudge them or send you their contact information. So that way, if there's a specific individual that you're wanting to get in touch with or have sent messages to and haven't heard back, definitely get in touch with myself. And I can help you, nudge that person and then get in contact with them.
Next question is from Mari, and it is the Find a Farmer platform mostly for matching tenants and owners, or for new farmers to buy from owners, or both?
I'd say both. I think right now, it depends. So right now we have a lot more land seekers on the site. So like I said, we're trying to get a lot more landowners there to make it equitable and equally balanced between the two, but definitely both. There are individuals there that are wanting to directly sell or directly lease land. It really just depends on what they're looking for, because we don't really have a differentiation. So if someone is a landowner on their specific profile, they're able to stay, whether it's leasing or directly selling, but there's no way to differentiate, from the landowners until you go to their profile, and then you're able to see specifically what type of land transfer or land relationship they're trying to have, but definitely both.
I have a question for both of you while we wait for more people to ask questions in the chat box. Regarding Mari's question, is there a good list of questions to think about when you're deciding whether you should own or lease land, or other options such as land trusts?
I'm happy to take or start that. So I think there are like literal lists of questions that organizations have put together. I would encourage people, if you're thinking about that and you want to look at our Finding Farmland course, the second lesson on land tenure options, I think in the resources, there's like lists of questions that, you could use if you're going to visit a property to, just have a whole list in case there's anything you didn't think of that you probably should ask about. So, about aspects of the property, about aspects of the neighbor or the community, or the markets, or, soils and all sorts of things. So there's definitely questions like that. I think maybe to the broader point of like questions to ask yourself, like how do you know if you should be leasing or buying or trying to transfer? Personally, I think that transferring farmland that's already in production or businesses that already exist is like the least, it's probably the most involved in most planning and maybe most long-term way of accessing farmland. But to me, it seems like the least risky. So if you, rather than building a customer base, if you can transfer a farm business that already has a customer base, or rather than acquiring all new equipment, if you could be transferring a property that has a lot of that equipment, knows what's wrong with it, knows the repair history of it, all those things are helpful ways of reducing your risk when you're getting onto a property and starting farming yourself. So I think in general, like transfer is the way to go if it's the thing that's available to you. And that kind of makes sense. Like that's the privilege that you have if you're a multi-generational farmer and you have a family business that you could take over. It's basically a type of transfer. It's just within the family. And it's a helpful way to know things about the business without having to reinvent all that knowledge from scratch. I think otherwise the leasing versus buying is a lot about your financial position, how much capital that you have, whether you're working off farm, whether you're trying to make it your full-time job, whether there is a house on the farm that you could live in, and if that's what you're looking to do. I think those are all big questions that, you know, might put you on, you know, the answer of to those questions might lean you towards one way or the other. So I don't know. I don't think there's a really good answer besides working with advisors like the folks at PFI to help you understand, you know, what risks you're taking and what's actually the right answer for you, the right opportunity for you.
Yeah, I'd echo all of that. And I feel like half the time it's like, what questions should I ask? But then it's like, what questions should I be asking myself before I ask the questions to others? And I think you already hit the head on the nail, Michael, about kind of navigating between leasing and renting. I think also kind of like what you already mentioned, like if there's housing, again, like what are your goals in terms of the land that you're trying to look for, and then being able to weigh risks and your own goals of what you're wanting to achieve in owning or accessing land. I think also another thing is like if you're not only thinking about finances, but maybe for financing, like leasing might be the most feasible, but in leasing land, how much growth do you have with that? Like, are you able to invest in infrastructure? Are you able to, you know, put water lines? Or are you only able to have like hoop housing? You're not able to put, you know, more solidified roots on that land because you're leasing it. You know, those are kind of some things that you have to think about in terms of one, the enterprises that you either already have established or want to establish, and what type of capacity or feasibility that the type of land tenure that you're pursuing allows you to do, and how much it allows you to grow. Because maybe feasibility wise, like leasing is more advantageous, but then on the long run, not only long run for cost, but then long run of your own business, how much are you able to grow with the land that you're currently leasing? And depending upon the relationship. So maybe the current person that you're leasing from maybe allows you to have that growth in a 5-10 year time period, depending upon the conversations that you have. But if you don't have the ability to do that, you know, maybe in the long run, that might not be the most feasible thing for you. But there's a lot of questions and a lot of things to think about when navigating what the best situation might be for you. Not only thinking about the short term and the long term in terms of 5 to 10 years, but then even plus that too.
To piggyback off that a little bit, off of Celize's response, I think the thing that I wish I would said originally is just to think about how, like, leasing versus buying to me is really not the question. It's like, what kind of security in your land tenure do you need? Like, in order to grow your business, in order to make investments in your business, do you need to know that you have this land forever and then therefore you need to own it? Like, are you planting apple trees, or are you grazing livestock, and those livestock could just be moved to a different place next season if, you know, something happens with your land tenure? So maybe it's okay to lease. So I think those again are like, go back to your business plan and what you want to do. But at the end of the day, it's really the security that you should be thinking about, and how secure do you feel on that property, and therefore how does that fit in your business plan? Like, are you able and willing to invest in your business? It's actually, so the way I've approached land access is actually not buying. It's funny, I do all this like educational work on buying farmland access to capital, but you know, I'm currently signing up for a 30-year lease with some property owners that I've been working with for the last 2 years, and trying to grow a grazing business in a way that I know that if that fails, because I've had failures with other landowners before as a tenant, you know, I'm building my business and investing in it in a way that it can move to a different property in the same area. And I feel like that's the way that I'm mitigating my risk. I'm even doing, like, sometimes I do it a little bit in jest, but it's actually what I'm doing. Like, if you can afford to buy a property, a farm property, I don't think that's a good reason to buy a farm property just because you can afford it. I think it's actually a better mitigation of your risk. If you don't have to buy a farm property, you're better off putting that capital in a condo somewhere in a different state and renting it out. You know, that's a better way of, you know, that's how people manage financial portfolios. It's not, you don't put all your eggs in one basket. There's no reason to tie up your capital in farm real estate if your business plan doesn't require you to own farm real estate. So, you know, it's probably better off buying a house in town, renting it out, or living in it than buying the farm property if you don't need to own the farm property in order for your business to work on it. Thanks, Elise.
I think the short answer is it's really complicated. And it depends on the situation, which is what both your answers really emphasize. And I have another question I'll ask you later, Michael, about how we get more landowners interested in land access for beginning farmers. But I'll ask you that in your booth, because unfortunately we are out of time. We have come to the end of the hour. Thanks everybody for joining us today, and thanks so much to Lease and Michael for introducing us to a few new tools. Land access is a huge barrier and potential huge opportunity if we can better navigate it, and these tools are heading toward that.